What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 108 of the Book Binge, where this week we're doing a little bit of a different experience that I had back last year. In fact, I think it was just over a year ago when I did this trilogy, that being the Another Kingdom trilogy. With these covers here, because I don't own the books physically, I did them on audio. They were actually pretty much my first experience trying out true audiobooks over the course of this reading journey, and I had a enjoyable enough time with them. I still definitely would not say that audio is my preferred method of reading, as my bookshelves behind make quite obvious, but I did have an enjoyable enough time with these. It is kind of crazy to think that it was over a year ago that I did this trilogy, and for, pretty much the entire time, I kind of forgot that the trilogy existed to some degree, partially because I didn't record a review of it, and I didn't think I would ever record a review of it, but I thought, I've reviewed pretty much everything that I've read on the channel anyway, so why not just do this as well? I figure it, makes a good extra video, since I've kind of been falling behind on several things the last couple months with some changes in my life, but that's unimportant for the purposes of today's video. So this week I am going to review the Another Kingdom trilogy by Andrew Klavan. I'm going to do it in a brief spoiler-free review for each of the three books, after which I'll briefly rank them. It will be kind of obvious what the ranking is, just kind of based off of how I talk about the three books. And then I will follow the brief review of each book and that, very brief ranking afterwards with a general recommendation overall, which will essentially cover the whole series, just, with a couple overarching points. In terms of the actual review, let's kind of jump into it because I don't want to waste too much time with this. I want to first talk about the first book in the trilogy, obviously being Another Kingdom. I thought this was a great, fantastic opener for the series as a whole. I thought that where the portal fantasy aspect of the story was involved, it was a great introduction. Very believable, and kept the pace up very well. The chapter-to-chapter events and going back and forth between essentially two worlds, because that is a lot of what makes the story and the series interesting, is not just the fact that, you go into another world and you have a tale there, and then you come back to the real world, and either things are the same or things are different, depending on what portal fantasy you're reading, but there is active storylines within both worlds. Klavan balances the two stories between the real world and the Other Kingdom perfectly. I thought it was genuinely fantastic, and was starting to change my mind a little bit on, maybe audio is actually pretty cool. Like, I actually retained a lot of the information. I had an enjoyable time with the story. It's not necessarily a new idea per se, but the way that Klavan wrote about it was very, very good and felt refreshing in the midst of what I was reading, even though at the time I was reading Dark Tower, which is, buck wild and really crazy on its own. I think if I were to do a reread of it right now, it would definitely, kind of refresh my reading senses a lot, just because of, what it's tackling, the stories that it's telling, and the portal fantasy aspect especially. Next up in the trilogy was The Nightmare Feast. This one I'm definitely not quite so sure about. There were a couple scenes that I still remember quite clearly because they're very vivid moments within the book. The title scene, like, the title of the book, The Nightmare Feast, it is a scene within the book. That one in particular was one that I remember quite well, but there was another scene that I also remember, but I actually don't know if it was in this book or if it was in the first book. And I know that there was a follow-up in the third book, so I think it might have happened in here. I actually don't remember. Like I said, I just don't remember much about this book at all. I didn't find The Nightmare Feast particularly memorable. Like, even right after I finished, I couldn't have told you a lot of what I had listened to. And this was when I was starting to doubt myself a little bit. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not particularly great at retaining information over audio. But I think it was just this book being a fluke because, I obviously did the third book in the trilogy, which I'm about to talk about here in a moment. But I've also been doing audio with some other personal study tools. I've been doing audio for The Wandering Inn, or at least I did it for the first volume of that. And I'm able to retain plenty of information there, so I think this book was just a fluke. If nothing else, I kind of want to reread the trilogy to see if my feelings on this middle book change, but as is, I definitely remember this being pretty much the pinnacle of middle book syndrome, where you have a great first book, a great last book, tipping my hand a little bit here, and then a middle book that just doesn't really do anything, or that doesn't seem like it does as much. I don't remember it being bad, I just don't remember it for whatever reason. Third up in the trilogy, obviously, is The Emperor's Sword, which paid off every storyline that I did remember from the second book, but particularly even through this first book, storylines with different characters, storylines with the main character especially, both storylines in the real world and in the other world. All fantastic. It wrapped everything up brilliantly. I don't know if I have The Emperor's Sword on my favorites shelf on Goodreads, but if I don't, I need to fix that because I still remember this book quite fondly. There's still, of all the specific scenes I remember from the trilogy as a whole, nearly all of them are from The Emperor's Sword. I just thought it was a very, very good book. Granted, the closing acts of series are things that I tend to just really enjoy a lot. Like a really good wrap-up is one of my favorite things ever, even more than a really good beginning. So that could be influencing my opinion here as well, but it does play with the Another Kingdom, even within the Another Kingdom of the book as well, and that kind of added a layer to it that I thought was really enjoyable. I remember a lot of character moments within the book that were really great, just general stuff within the storylines that was all really cool and interesting, you know. Overall, it was a very solid conclusion that I think worked brilliantly to wrap up what Another Kingdom as the first book introduced. Even if I didn't remember a lot from the Nightmare Feast, The Emperor's Sword was still a very good time. And this is part of the reason why I want to re-listen to these books, because, you know, I want to see what I might have missed, especially within the second book, and see if it happens to make The Emperor's Sword even better, in my opinion, just from the fact that I wouldn't have missed all of that stuff again. I just had a really, really fun time listening to this one, even as a non-audio guy. And, you know, just kind of as a broad general series plus, I'm going to say that, you know, the audio narration is pretty good. But in terms of the recommendation for modern portal fantasy, this was a very good and enjoyable series. I thought the trilogy did a lot of things very well. Even if the middle book isn't fantastic, the third book is absolutely worth getting through the second book for. Sorry for my getting tongue-tied and saying the wrong word there, because that's not what I meant at first. There are a lot of great moments, a lot of great payoff, really tight plotting, and just, you know, a concept that hooks you immediately, and with pacing, you know, that just drags you through it to boot, you know, drags you, you know, you want to spend more time with certain things, and then the book goes on to the next thing, and you're almost like, no, wait, but then it pulls you to another cool thing, and you're like, oh, wait, actually, this is really cool. There's just a lot of stuff like that. As I said, even as a non-audio guy, Michael Knowles did a really great job with the audio, surprisingly. Of course, I don't necessarily have a lot of experience with audio, so, you know, a lot of people could really hate his performance with the book, but I thought it was pretty decent. He had a lot more voices than I thought that he would, and I was really skeptical going into it, being like, Michael Knowles doing a audio narration for these books, like, that doesn't seem like it would work, and it worked. It worked really well for me, and even more than just the general narration. Like I mentioned with the voices, there's one side character from Another Kingdom you meet in the very first book. In fact, it's from one of the very first scenes in The Other Kingdom within the book that I can still hear in my head to this day. Just great voices, great narration, I thought. Speaking of, the audio for all three books is free to Daily Wire Plus subscribers. I believe for the Insider tier and up, I think that's where you have to be. So if you happen to be on Daily Wire, then you can actually get this audio for free. That's how I listen to it. That's why I decided to listen to it. I was just like, well, I have it for free. I've been reading a lot recently. I'll just check it out because I can, and I ended up having a really great time. So if anybody happens to have that, they can get it there for free, like I said, or they can just, you know, read it or listen to it wherever else. I think there's probably audio on other platforms. I haven't checked. Like I said, if you already have that access to it, there's literally no reason not to read it. Like, it's the reason that I decided to read them in the first place, and I thought it was worth it. They're also pretty short books. I suppose I should add this on as well. Book 1 is around 9.5 hours. Book 2 is around 9 hours. Book 3 is around 11 hours. So, and that's at one-time speed, like just the normal speed of the audio. They combine to 29 hours basically, which is less than your typical epic fantasy book on one-time speed. So even if you are a one-time or 1.2 times speed listener like me at the quickest, you could listen to these 29 hours as if they were just 23 hours. And if you're one of those two-time listener people, which I don't personally understand how somebody could do that, but I'm generally a slow processor anyway, but if you are one of those people who listens to stuff at 2 times speed, let alone quicker, whole trilogy is going to be a breeze. You could knock it out in literally just a couple days, like total. So frankly, it would make for a perfect palate cleanser, whether you did one book in between the big books or you did the whole trilogy in between the big books, because yeah, it's definitely pretty solid. But yeah, I recommend the trilogy as a whole. But thank you guys for watching this video. If you did on Thursday, just as always, there will be another Wheel of Time diary while I'm reading The Dragon Reborn right up there. I'm pretty sure it'll be the last one for the month and therefore the last one for the book, as long as everything goes well anyway. So that's something that I'm quite excited for. Thank you guys for watching. I'll be back in the next video.